The true crime podcaster got 19 details wrong about my sister's murder. I'm the one who found her body. The hotel ballroom smelled like stale coffee and ambition. I stood near the back wall, my conference badge reading David Brennan clipped to my shirt pocket, watching 300 people file in to hear Jenna Justice dissect my sister's murder. Nobody here knew me as Ryan Brennan, the brother who found Alicia's body in our shared apartment on a Sunday morning in March 2019. They only knew what Jenna had told them. The True Crime Nation convention occupied the entire downtown Portland Marriott. I'd paid $400 to register under my middle name and spent 2 days listening to strangers theorize about the worst day of my life. Jenna's keynote was the main event. Her podcast, Justice Unserved, had 3 million downloads per episode. She sold Team Alicia merchandise and had a Patreon tier called Elite Investigators that cost $50 a month. The lights dimmed, and Jenna walked on stage to thunderous applause. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Behind her, the screen displayed Alicia's nursing school graduation photo, the one where she's smiling in her scrubs. Jenna had used that photo in every episode without asking permission. "We're going to dive deep into one of the most heartbreaking cases I've ever covered," Jenna's voice boomed through the speakers. The murder of Alicia Brennan, a beautiful young woman whose life was cut short by someone she trusted, someone she loved. The screen changed to show a map of our apartment building, except it was the wrong building. Detail number 1 on my list. Jenna clicked through her presentation, weaving a narrative I barely recognized. According to her, Alicia had been having a secret affair with a married doctor at the hospital where she worked, a man who became violent when she threatened to expose him. She described how Alicia had been found in her bedroom wearing a red dress, suggesting she'd been preparing for a romantic evening that turned deadly. The murder weapon had been a kitchen knife, Jenna explained. She theorized about the time of death, the position of the body, the evidence of struggle. Every word was delivered with absolute certainty. I sat there gripping the armrests of my chair, counting the lies. Alicia wasn't having an affair. She'd been single for 8 months. She wasn't wearing a red dress. She was in her purple nursing scrubs because she'd just gotten home from a night shift. The murder weapon wasn't a knife. She'd been strangled. The most tragic part, Jenna continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, is that Alicia's own brother found her body. Ryan Brennan came home from a weekend trip and discovered his sister. But here's what's interesting, and I want to tread carefully here because trauma affects memory. Ryan's initial statement to police was notably brief. He was described by first responders as unusually calm. He couldn't provide details about Alicia's recent activities or relationships. She paused for effect. The audience murmured. I heard the woman next to me whisper that she'd always wondered about the brother. My hands were shaking. Jenna was carefully suggesting I might have been involved in my sister's murder. She wasn't saying it directly, but the implication hung in the air. The unusually calm brother who couldn't remember details. The shared apartment. She was planting seeds of doubt in 300 minds. I raised my hand before I could stop myself. Jenna's eyes flickered with annoyance. Yes, we'll have Q&A at the end. But I kept my hand up. She sighed dramatically. Okay, go ahead. Keep it brief, please. I stood up, my heart hammering. You said Alicia was found in a red dress. That's not correct. She was wearing her nursing scrubs, purple with a print pattern, because she'd just finished a night shift. Jenna's smile tightened. I appreciate your input, but I have multiple sources that confirmed the red dress. It's actually a crucial detail because it suggests she was expecting someone. The scrub story is a common misconception. The audience was quiet now. I felt 300 pairs of eyes on me. Your sources are wrong. I'm the one who found her. She was in her scrubs. Jenna's expression shifted. And you are? I pulled out my wallet and held up my driver's license. Ryan Brennan, Alicia's brother. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Jenna's face went through several expressions. Shock, calculation, then landing on sympathetic concern that looked practiced and fake. Ryan, I had no idea you were here. I'm so sorry you had to hear about your sister's case in this setting, but I need you to understand that trauma can affect memory. I've consulted with multiple experts and reviewed all available evidence. I felt rage building in my chest. She wasn't having an affair with a doctor. She was single. You invented that entire storyline. Jenna shook her head slowly, sadly. Ryan, I have testimony from her coworkers about a relationship she was keeping secret. I understand this might be news to you, but victims often hide things from their families. I pulled out my phone. There is no Dr. Nathan Crawford at Providence Hospital. I called and verified. You made him up. The whispers got louder. Jenna's composure cracked slightly. I protected his identity with a pseudonym for legal reasons. I started listing them, my voice getting louder. You said she was found at Riverside Apartments on Morrison Street. We lived at Cedar Grove on Hawthorne. You said the murder weapon was a kitchen knife. She was strangled. You said her time of death was between 10 p.m. and midnight on Saturday. She died Sunday morning between 6 and 8 a.m., according to the medical examiner. You said she had defensive wounds on her hands. The autopsy report shows no defensive wounds. You said her ex-boyfriend Kyle was out of state with a solid alibi. Kyle was never a suspect and was at work with 30 witnesses. Jenna held up her hands. Ryan, I understand you're upset, but you're mixing up details from different sources. I pulled out printed pages from my bag. I have the real police reports right here. You want to compare? The moderator stepped forward nervously. People were pulling out their phones, recording, probably already posting to social media. Jenna's mask slipped further. Her voice took on a sharp edge. I've spent 2 years investigating this case. I've interviewed dozens of people, reviewed hundreds of pages of evidence, consulted with forensic experts. I think I have a slightly better grasp of the facts than someone who was too traumatized to even give a complete statement to police. The implication was clear. Several people nodded. The woman next to my empty seat was filming me with her phone. I gave a complete statement, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I spent 6 hours at the police station. I was calm because I was in shock, because I'd just found my sister dead in her bedroom. You're twisting their report to make me look suspicious. Jenna smiled sadly, playing to the crowd. That's your interpretation. From my research, your behavior raised some questions. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just presenting the facts as they exist. Before I could respond, security guards were moving toward me. I ended up in a conference room with hotel security, all treating me like a potential threat. I showed them my evidence, my printed police reports. They looked at the papers with polite disinterest. One guard said he loved Jenna's podcast and was sure there was just some misunderstanding. After 30 minutes, they let me go with a warning not to disrupt any more panels. I walked back toward the ballroom but stopped when I heard Jenna's voice resuming. That was Alicia's brother Ryan. My heart breaks for him. He's been through unimaginable trauma, but this is exactly why victim families aren't always the best sources. Trauma and grief can distort memory. We have to follow the evidence, not emotions. I stood outside, listening to her spin the confrontation into proof of her credibility. She was telling the audience that Ryan Brennan was an unreliable narrator, and they were believing her. Jenna had 3 million loyal listeners. I was just one person saying she was wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Why didn't you tell me you were at the convention? Jenna just posted about you disrupting her panel. What were you thinking? I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. My mother had been distant since Jenna's podcast started, gravitating toward Jenna's version of events. The Facebook group, Justice for Alicia, that Jenna moderated, had become my mother's obsession. I called her. Mom, listen to me. Everything Jenna is saying about Alicia is wrong. She's making things up. My mother's voice was tight with frustration. Jenna has been nothing but supportive. She's helped me understand what happened in ways the police never did. She's given me hope that we'll find justice. I felt desperate. She said Alicia was having an affair with a married doctor. That never happened. You know, Alicia would have told us. There was a long pause. Maybe she didn't tell us because she knew we'd judge her. My mother continued, her voice harder now. Jenna showed me messages, Ryan. Screenshots from Alicia's phone that proved she was involved with someone at the hospital. The police must have missed them, but Jenna found them. My mind went blank. What messages? Mom, I went through Alicia's phone with the detectives. There were no messages about any relationship. Jenna is lying to you. Why would she lie? My mother's voice rose. She doesn't get paid by whether the case is solved. She's trying to help us. Unlike you, who barely even talks about Alicia anymore, who refused to do an interview for the podcast. The accusation hit like a physical blow. I'd refused Jenna's interview requests because she'd already started spreading misinformation. I think about her every single day, I said quietly. I found her, Mom. I held her hand while we waited for the ambulance. But Jenna isn't helping. She's making money off Alicia's death by turning it into entertainment. My mother was quiet for a moment. The Facebook group has been wonderful for me. Those people understand my pain, and Jenna treats Alicia with respect and dignity. I tried again. She sells t-shirts with Alicia's face on them. She has a Patreon tier where people pay $50 a month to access special content about the murder. She's making thousands of dollars exploiting our family's tragedy. My mother wavered but stayed firm. Maybe that money will help solve the case. The police have basically given up. At least Jenna cares. And frankly, some of the things she's uncovered make me wonder if you've been completely honest about that morning. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. What are you talking about? My mother's voice was barely steady. Your timeline doesn't quite add up. Jenna walked me through all of this. She's not accusing you of anything. But there are questions that need answers. She hung up before I could respond. I went back to my hotel room and spent hours documenting everything. I created a detailed spreadsheet with Jenna's 19 lies in one column and the actual facts in another, complete with sources and evidence. I scanned police reports, photographed pages that directly contradicted her claims, compiled video clips from her podcast. The work kept me focused, gave me something to do besides panic about my mother doubting my innocence. That evening, the convention had a cocktail hour for VIP ticket holders. I'd upgraded my pass specifically to gain access, knowing Jenna would be there. I needed to confront her, privately. The hotel bar was crowded with true crime enthusiasts. I spotted Jenna near the windows, surrounded by admirers. She looked relaxed and happy, feeding off the attention, completely unbothered by our earlier confrontation. I waited until her crowd thinned, then approached with my folder of evidence. We need to talk. Jenna turned to me with exaggerated concern. Ryan, hi. Are you feeling better? That must have been so overwhelming earlier. Her performance was flawless, her voice loud enough for nearby people to hear. You need to issue a correction, I said quietly. Publicly acknowledge that you got details wrong. I held out the folder. I have everything documented here. Police reports, medical examiner findings, everything you need to fix your mistakes. Jenna didn't take the folder. She sipped her wine. I understand you're upset, but I stand by my research. The discrepancies you're pointing out are based on your personal recollection, which may not be entirely reliable. I fought to keep my temper in check. These aren't my personal recollections. These are official documents. The medical examiner's report says Alicia died from strangulation between 6 and 8 a.m. on Sunday. Your podcast says she was stabbed between 10 p.m. and midnight on Saturday. You're factually wrong. Jenna set down her wine glass. When she spoke, her voice had lost all pretense of sympathy. Here's what I think is happening. You're a grieving brother who's never fully processed what happened. You've built a narrative that makes you feel better, that makes Alicia's death simpler. But the truth is messy. Your sister was living a secret life you knew nothing about, and you're so desperate to preserve your image of her that you can't accept reality. I felt my voice rising. There is no reality where she was stabbed in a red dress. There is no Dr. Nathan Crawford. You made all of that up to make the story more marketable. You're not an investigator, you're a storyteller, and you don't care that your story is destroying my family. Jenna picked up her wine again, signaling the conversation was over. I won't compromise my journalistic integrity just because it makes you uncomfortable. I almost laughed. You've convinced my mother that I might have been involved in my sister's murder. Jenna's eyes hardened. Your mother deserves to know the truth about what happened to her daughter. If that truth makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know what I think? I think you're hiding something. Your reaction is too emotional, too defensive. Innocent people don't usually fight this hard. She smiled coldly. I'm going to keep digging, Ryan. And if there's something you're not telling the police, I'm going to find it. I left the bar before I said something I'd regret. My hands were shaking with rage and helplessness. Jenna had weaponized my grief against me, using my emotional response as evidence that I was hiding something. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and started searching for other people Jenna had hurt. It didn't take long. A Reddit thread titled, "Jenna Justice Got My Brother's Case Wrong," had 300 comments from people sharing similar stories. I read through dozens of accounts. A woman whose daughter was murdered said Jenna had fabricated a drug addiction storyline. A father said Jenna had implied his son was living a secret gay lifestyle when his son had been openly gay. A sister said Jenna had created a love triangle theory that fractured her family. The pattern was clear. Jenna would take a real unsolved case, add dramatic fictional elements, present speculation as fact, and build a profitable following. When family members tried to correct her, she'd dismiss them as unreliable narrators. Her audience would defend her viciously. I found a private Facebook group called Jenna Justice Victims Families with 200 members. I requested to join. Within an hour, I was accepted. The posts were heartbreaking. Parents describing how Jenna's false narratives had been picked up by other media. Siblings talking about destroyed relationships. One woman described receiving death threats because Jenna had implied she might have been involved in her husband's murder. The next morning, I met with 3 other families at a coffee shop downtown. Linda's son had been murdered in a home invasion that Jenna reframed as a drug deal gone wrong. Robert's wife had been killed by a drunk driver that Jenna speculated was actually a hired hit. Amy's teenage daughter had died by suicide, but Jenna insisted was murdered. She destroyed my relationship with my ex-husband, Amy said. He started believing I knew about a sex trafficking ring and did nothing. Jenna's fans send me messages every day calling me a monster. Linda nodded bitterly. She convinced my daughter-in-law that my son was a drug dealer. My grandchildren are being raised to believe their father was a criminal. He was an accountant who worked at the same firm for 12 years. Robert was quiet, but his anger was palpable. My wife's real killer is still out there. The drunk driver served 3 years and got out, but nobody's looking for him because Jenna convinced the internet that my wife was murdered by a hitman. We talked for hours, sharing frustration and strategizing. Amy had contacted a lawyer about defamation, but the attorney said it would be difficult because Jenna framed everything as questions rather than statements of fact. Linda had tried reporting the podcast to platforms, but they said Jenna's content didn't violate their terms. Robert had created a website documenting inaccuracies, but it got virtually no traffic compared to Jenna's massive audience. The problem is, she's too big now, Linda said. She has millions of listeners, major sponsors, and a book deal. Platforms won't touch her because she makes them money. Her fans are cult-like, and she's very careful about wording things to avoid legal liability. She looked at me with sympathy. The best advice I can give you is protect yourself and try to repair things with your mother before Jenna completely poisons that relationship. You're not going to be able to stop her. I left feeling more hopeless than ever. I walked back toward the hotel in a fog of defeat. That's when I literally bumped into someone coming out of a building, nearly knocking coffee out of her hands. Sorry, I said automatically, then stopped when I saw her face. She was maybe 25, with dark hair and tired eyes, wearing hospital scrubs. For a split second, I thought of Alicia. The woman smiled apologetically. No worries. Long shift. She started to walk past, then stopped. Wait, are you Ryan Brennan? I froze. How do you know who I am? She pulled out her phone and showed me a video posted to TikTok. It was footage from the convention, me confronting Jenna. The caption read, "Family member has meltdown at true crime convention," and had 2 million views. The comments called me unstable, suspicious, aggressive. Several people speculated that my overreaction was proof of guilt. "I'm Qley," the woman said softly. "I worked with your sister at Providence. I was there the night she finished her last shift. Can we talk somewhere private?" We sat on a bench in a nearby park. "Jenna contacted me 6 months ago," Qley said. "She wanted to interview me about Alicia. I told her the truth, that Alicia was professional, kind, dedicated. She wasn't involved in any workplace drama or romance. She was just a good nurse who worked hard and went home to study." She looked uncomfortable. "So why did Jenna say Alicia was having an affair?" I asked. Qley continued. "I mentioned there was a doctor who would sometimes chat with Alicia during breaks. Dr. Stephen Foster. He's married, like most of the older doctors, and he was friendly with everyone. I said Alicia seemed to enjoy their conversations because Dr. Foster had also put himself through nursing school before medical school. That's it. That's the entire story." She paused. When the podcast came out, I was horrified. She'd twisted everything I said, created this whole romantic narrative that never existed. I tried to contact her to correct it, but she never responded. Qley pulled out her phone. "I kept the emails I sent to Jenna's producer. I have the original interview recording too. I recorded it on my phone without telling them because something felt off about how Jenna was asking questions, like she wanted me to say specific things. She showed me her phone. There were dozens of emails to Jenna's team, all ignored. I talked to 2 other nurses who were also interviewed. Same thing happened to them. Jenna took innocent comments about Alicia being friendly or pretty or good at her job and twisted them into evidence of some secret dramatic life." Qley looked at me with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Ryan. I feel responsible. If I'd just refused to talk to her, maybe she wouldn't have had enough material to build that storyline." I shook my head. "She would have made something up anyway. That's what she does." Qley nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet, but would you be willing to go on record? Tell the truth publicly?" Qley hesitated, fear crossing her face. Jenna's fans are vicious. I've seen what they do to people who challenge her. I understood. These people had jobs, families, lives they needed to protect. But then Qley straightened her shoulders. "Alicia was a good person. She deserves to have her real story told. If you're willing to fight this, I'll help however I can." She gave me her contact information and promised to send me copies of everything she had. We exchanged numbers and she left for her shift. I sat on that bench for a long time, thinking about what Qley had said. Jenna hadn't just gotten details wrong. She'd deliberately manipulated her sources, twisted their words, and ignored their attempts to correct her. This wasn't sloppy journalism. This was intentional fabrication, and I finally had proof. That night, I created a Twitter account using my real name. I posted a thread detailing the 19 specific lies Jenna had told about Alicia's case, with evidence for each one. I included photos of the police reports, screenshots of the medical examiner's findings, and Qley's emails to Jenna trying to correct the record. I tagged Jenna, her podcast network, and several journalists who covered true crime media. The thread went viral within hours. Thousands of retweets, tens of thousands of likes. The comments were mixed, half supporting me, half defending Jenna. But other victims' families started sharing their own stories in the replies, creating a massive public documentation of Jenna's pattern of fabrication. By morning, it had been picked up by several news outlets. True crime podcaster accused of fabricating details in multiple cases. Victims' families speak out against popular podcast host. Jenna Justice under fire for allegedly spreading misinformation? Jenna responded with a statement saying she stood by her research and that grieving families sometimes misremember details due to trauma. But the damage was done. People were starting to ask questions. Her Patreon lost 1,000 subscribers in 24 hours. Major sponsors started pulling their ads. The podcast network issued a statement saying they were reviewing the allegations. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with interview requests from journalists, producers, other podcasters. I ignored most of them, but I agreed to talk to a reporter from the New York Times who was doing an investigation into ethics in true crime media. The interview was scheduled for the next day. That evening, my mother finally called. I answered with my heart in my throat. "Ryan," she said, and her voice was different, softer. "I saw what posted. I've been reading through everything you documented." There was a long pause. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you from the beginning. I was just so desperate for answers, for someone to care about finding Alicia's killer, that I let Jenna manipulate me. I believed her lies because I wanted to believe someone was fighting for Alicia. I felt tears burning in my eyes. It's okay, Mom. She's good at what she does. She convinced a lot of people." My mother's voice broke. "No, it's not okay. I doubted you. I let her twist my grief into suspicion of my own son, the son who found his sister and has been carrying that trauma for 4 years while I accused him of lying." She was crying now. "Can you forgive me?" I wiped my eyes. "There's nothing to forgive. Jenna did this to both of us. She exploited our grief and turned us against each other. That's on her, not you. We talked for over an hour, really talked for the first time since Alicia died. My mother told me she'd already left the Facebook group and sent a message to Jenna saying she no longer supported the podcast. She said several other parents from the group had done the same after seeing my thread. The community Jenna had built was starting to fracture as people realized they'd been fed lies. The Times article came out 3 days later. It was devastating for Jenna. The reporter had interviewed 15 different victims' families, all with similar stories of fabrication and manipulation. She'd obtained actual police reports and compared them to Jenna's claims, documenting hundreds of inaccuracies across dozens of cases. She'd talked to law enforcement officials who said Jenna had never actually assisted with any investigations despite her claims. The article revealed that Dr. Nathan Crawford didn't exist, that the sources Jenna cited were often completely fabricated, that she'd been threatened with legal action by multiple families, but had settled quietly to avoid publicity. Within a week, Jenna's podcast network dropped her. Spotify removed her show. Her book deal was canceled. Her social media accounts lost hundreds of thousands of followers. She tried to fight back, posting videos claiming she was being persecuted for being a woman in media, but nobody was buying it anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming. Other journalists started investigating her work, finding more lies, more fabricated sources, more families she'd hurt. One reporter discovered that Jenna had never actually worked as a journalist or investigator before starting her podcast, despite claiming years of experience. Her credentials were as fake as her cases. Several families, including mine, filed formal complaints with the Federal Trade Commission about her fraudulent claims and deceptive business practices. A class action lawsuit was being organized by victims' families who'd been defamed by her coverage. Jenna disappeared from public view, her website went dark, her social media went silent. The empire she'd built on other people's tragedies collapsed in less than a month. My mother and I attended a support group meeting for families affected by Jenna's podcast. 20 people showed up, sharing stories and starting to heal together. 6 months later, I got a call from a detective in Portland. They'd arrested someone for Alicia's murder, a man who'd been working maintenance in our apartment building, who'd had access to all the units, who'd been on parole for a previous assault. They'd matched his DNA to evidence from the scene that had finally been processed after sitting in a backlog for years. He confessed to killing Alicia when she'd come home from her shift and found him in our apartment. It wasn't a romantic triangle, it wasn't a secret affair, it wasn't any of Jenna's dramatic theories. It was a random, senseless act of violence by a predator who had access and opportunity. My mother and I sat together in the courtroom when he was sentenced to life without parole. Alicia's real story, the truth of who she was and how she died, was finally on record. Not Jenna's fiction, not the manufactured drama, just the simple, heartbreaking truth. We held hands and cried together, grieving properly for the first time in 4 years. I still think about Alicia every day, but now when I remember her, I remember the truth. The dedicated nurse who loved pediatrics, who worked night shifts to gain experience, who wore scrubs with cartoon stethoscopes, who dreamed of specializing in children's medicine. Not Jenna's fictional character in a red dress having a dramatic affair. The real Alicia, my sister, who deserved better than to have her death turned into profitable entertainment. Jenna never apologized. She never admitted she was wrong, but she lost everything she'd built on lies, and the families she hurt got their truth back. Sometimes that has to be enough. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.